Hey everybody, I'm Nico.
And I'm Tori, and welcome to the Billy Club.
It's amazing. I love that there's like stuff. I didn't want to say my own stuff because you can like look down and you can see my stuff right below me. And I don't know if you noticed, but repping Daredevil yellow on my side, Daredevil red on Tori's side. It feels good. There's so many costumes. Let's fucking pick from them. You know what I mean?
Woo!
And of course, we have our incredible Billy Clubbist, our Kevo producer extraordinaire, running everything behind the scenes, giving us all of this beautiful visual, here to celebrate the fact that this might be a Daredevil issue on the outside, Daredevil's 16 and 17, but it's all
But
Spider Man inside, guys.
gotta wear the red to rep both.
Thwip, thwip. I am so excited to be here, Tori. It is so much fun taking a look at like more Spider-Man Daredevil. I don't know. I get like a special feeling from this combo of people.
Oh, I love it. It's like Big Brother, Little Brother kind of stuff. It's so
Yeah,
cute.
and there's so much in this particular story that I cannot wait to dive into. Like some really specific stuff that both hit me really well and hit me a little rough. But the main thing that I walked away from this issue with is feeling like I can understand why, with so few appearances together, so many fans in the 60s so associate these two as BFF.
It's true. It's true. And I think it helps that like they're both these Manhattan kind of street level fighters at this point. They're both really what some of the few that are still hiding their identities.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an interesting thing because they both fight smart, they both fight strong, and I really do feel like they're both just like Daredevil's a slightly older version of Peter, and Peter's a slightly more daring version of our Daredevil.
I get that. I totally get that. There's so many beautiful balances between the two of them that I think make them both seem so well matched. There's ways in which they feel falsely swapped at times, where I'm like,
Mm.
Daredevil, you're behaving a little bit more like a kid, and Spider Man, you're behaving a little bit more like the adult here. I'm not sure exactly, because, Stan Lee was the guy writing all of this, just to mention really quick. We have Daredevil numbers 16 and 17, written by the unforgettable Stan Lee. We're also going to be taking a look at some beautiful art by John Romita and Frankie Ray. Now, issue 16 has letters by Artie Simic, but issue 17 has letters by Sam Rosen. Otherwise, you're looking at an unbelievably similar creative team. Now, Kevo, I just want to, big time out there for Kevo, who is doing a beautiful job with these graphics. This cover, number 17, is so special to me because it was, for the longest time in my life, my earliest Daredevil comic. So I have like a 3.2 condition copy of Daredevil 17. And so in my head, that's what the Masked Marauder looks like, this weird color swap. And, I always think of the giant Spidey, the giant Spidey light in the background, and how you can put Spider-Man in the book without making it Spider-Man's cover. And
Yeah.
I have a lot of really fond feelings for this two-parter.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I was approaching it and I was like, this is an interesting plot choice because so much of it is just to get us to the point where we could have these two fighting on the cover.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm not even sure that that's Daredevil on the cover. It's such a weird angle. It's such a weird look for Matt that
And he's like kind of like, yeah,
to
okay.
me, it almost feels like this is one of the copies that we'll get into.
Wow. I love that. So then technically there's no Daredevil on this Daredevil cover.
Right, like that's what I'm thinking, and even on the inner cover page, like he's throwing weird. He's in a weird stance for the way that he throws. It's very not how Matt approaches things.
That's an incredible read. I feel like I missed that completely. I missed that iconography. And, we're seeing phantasmagoric penciling coming together from John Romita, who is actually better known for his Spider-Man in every discernible way. That is his character. He's the guy that took over for Ditko, or it was at least soon thereafter. Romita is known for Spider-Man. He's not known for Daredevil. So getting him here, but I mean, frankly, Spider-Man looks better the whole issue. Not
Yeah.
anything against Romita's Daredevil, but Spider-Man looks better the whole issue.
You can just tell who he's more comfortable drawing. You really can. But I will also say that the amount of work going in to make sure that you know that this group of Daredevil's duplicates, their faces are very different from Matt's. They have a whole lot more like expression and features under the mask that I think really does sell it. That like we're like, okay, this is not Matt.
I love that. That's
Mm-hmm.
such a great take. Now, Masked Marauder doesn't really represent like any great huge thing in Marvel. He will go on to have something like 12 appearances maybe, but he's not an epic character like, Hornhead here. And there are other Masked Marauder kind of characters, but I think the big thing about this story is number 1, I am so excited for a Spider-Man team up. It's crazy. But number 2, the way Matt uses the media machine to get his way yet again is starting to become the mighty Murdock manner. And I'm really impressed because this is something we see continue on to the Jester's appearances, and we'll see versus Bullseye. We're going to see these tropes used against his villains so consistently. It reminds me why Daredevil is so smart.
Yeah, I really do feel like Daredevil is much more part of the swinging 60s, whereas sometimes Spider-Man can feel a little still caught in the like early 60s Donna Reeve, Leave It to Beaver, late 50s kind of vibe.
I totally get that. Yeah, Peter Parker, as a kid of the 60s, written by a guy who was significantly older, it's hard not to think of Peter Parker as an older person's interpretation of youth, although he's drawn so huge here. Peter
He's
Parker in this
big.
issue, he's fucking huge. And like they go out of their way to say how much stronger than Daredevil he is all the time. Sorry about it, Matty boy. It's true. And
Spider
I
strength.
wonder spider strength, the proportional strength of a spider, which is, you know, I guess one of those things where like you used to be able to get away with sentences like that, proportional strength of a whatever, proportional strength of a whatever, because I don't think we really understood certain things. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, ants has proven that ant-men are really strong and, walking down the street thwipping and then man, I just one more time, so cool, so nice to get a little bit more Spidey this issue. I just love them as best friends so
Yeah.
much. It like not in a dumb way, but kind of like in a dumb way. It's why I love doing this with you so much that it's specifically not just always about experiencing the thing you love alone,
Mm.
because Matt finally, there's that line where all I could do was think of you, where Matt's like, oh gosh, finally, the air on my face, feeling free, swinging through. He's finally
Oh.
dissociating Daredevil from Matt, where they're like two separate identities for him finally. He's not one
Yes.
guy doing both, he's
Yes.
two people. And I feel like, that opportunity to discuss, like, I can't even imagine if Peter is ever like, yeah, man, have you ever just taken a corner wrong when you're swinging? And Matt's like, the other day, I grabbed my billy club around what I thought was a gargoyle, but it was a flagpole, and I fell, and it wasn't graceful. And like, can you imagine them getting to have that conversation? Like, like I romanticize it so much.
Yeah, I definitely want like sassy young Peter or Miles Morales to run into like the super like guilt trodden like Daredevil guy who takes it so seriously, and you're just like, you need to lighten up, and you kid, you need to learn some maturity because these two things, they're two halves of the same coin.
You
So,
have to have that balance.
ants.
So I love this clip. It is just absolutely one of my favorite things in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am obsessed with it. Producer extraordinaire Kevo just really peeking in with the realness. Big fan. Now, I do have one big complaint about this story right away. And Tori, I don't know if you were there with me, but I mean literally right away. I loved that front page. And I did even think on that front page, like, why is Daredevil throwing a bottle at the wall? But
Yeah.
like, I was like, ooh, cool. We're starting in the middle. It's a good beat. Never mind.
Nope. It's just a chance to be like, I had two ideas for the cover and we went with that one, but this one will be over here.
That's exactly what I think it was. I think sometimes some of these front piece splashes are just what didn't make the cover.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to because the weird superimposed nature of this cover for 16, it's not that there's no details on those buildings, because if you go in you can actually see,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the digital where you can zoom, or on the really nice presentation of the omnibus edition. Because I just want to point out one more time, there are these beautiful digests that they're doing that are like digest size. They're 10 issues each. They're tiny, they're gorgeous, they look so Silver Age in all the ways that matter. You know, we're seeing the detail, we're seeing the quality work here. There's just some really weird coloration choices to the way it all sits together, to the way it all feels. I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's not a complaint.
this is a very gray cover for a series that always plays in very hyper bright colors.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And there's something about the whoosh effects being in pure white in a way that delineates and cuts off so severely.
Yeah,
But
it's a choice. But
but
for
on that
me, the real coloration problems is the color TV for the blind man who can't see it.
uh well, okay. I mean, maybe it's for the others.
I mean, sure. Sure. But like then we have to spend the whole time describing to him what's going on as opposed to just enjoying showing it. I don't know. It's a
I'm I
it's an
I get you.
interesting choice when we know that they have a radio.
If I can for one moment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not that I don't think the digital does a beautiful job rendering it, but specifically I keep my digital and my omnibus open at the same time when I do these episodes so that I can see any ways the art might have changed here or there, any little changes they might have made. I can see where the indica might have been a little bit more clearly. There's something so charming about the color of the books on this bookcase. It's a little bit more vibrant in person. The blue is a little bit more shocking.
Mm-hmm.
The purple has a little bit more red hue to it. But that with the wall, the green on Foggy, the red on Karen, the yellows that are all specifically different than the wall itself,
Mm-hmm.
there's a vibrancy to this book that I feel like we expect from books today,
Mm-hmm.
that we occasionally have trouble getting from books today. And there's still this beautiful transition to the fade effect, this very kind of like, Silver Age look that I'm going for with my backdrop and the coloration I'm using
Mm-hmm.
to try and create what's on this screen. And it's just masterful.
Yeah, yeah. It is really fun to be back in these colors. I really, really do enjoy them. This was actually the first part where I was like, why is Spider-Man so big whenever he's in Daredevil's books? Like he is
Yeah.
massive.
And
But
I'm not complaining,
mhm,
because I think that's a hotter look and it like helps me dissociate Spidey from being a child.
yeah. Yeah, but it makes it harder for me to understand why Aunt May is all up in his business, treating him like he's a colicky 4-year-old.
Okay, because okay, I really get that. That's a weird example of where I think we forget that you experience things differently based on your fandom and your experience and where you started. I come from it as like, and Aunt May's kind of Peter, you're always getting up to trouble. Because he's always coming home bruised. But like at the same time, that's every hero to me. This issue, Foggy's like, Matt, you're looking kind of tired. And Matt's like, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, oh, Daredevil hasn't been around. And I'm just like, so what is Matt doing? Like napping? Why does he look tired?
Meanwhile, there are so many Daredevils in this issue. The Masked Marauder's plan is a little ridiculous. I understand what they're going for, kind of. But one of the things that I always get into with these storylines is it requires so much that Daredevil matter. And outside of Daredevil, Daredevil doesn't matter.
I think it's really interesting because, like, to me, if you get past Daredevil, it's not like there are no other superheroes that are going to descend upon Manhattan. There's a
Oh,
million of
truly.
them. And so, like, what do you think you gain by, like, being the masked marauder and getting away against Daredevil? Like, Spider-Man at the minimum's going to show up. You know, there's a power guy and Iron Fist and like 15 Avengers. Like, you're really not going to get that far.
Completely. And I love your perspective on this page. I agree that they all look different than Daredevil. That's really cool because something we complain about is hyper consistency of faces being tricky at this point in time. So it's really great that they like leaned into that these all look like different guys.
Yeah.
And
And then they blind one to make it, you know, thematic.
I have in my notes, I really needed bad guys to stop thinking that hurting one of their own made them seem stronger. It makes you seem like you cannot manage your team.
Yeah.
This just makes you seem like a bad leader. I
Yeah.
would give you a bad report on your review.
Yeah, and honestly, the workers' comp is going to be so expensive.
Good luck. Because, like, I mean, I don't see him getting out of this paperwork anytime soon. He probably
Seriously.
has them all listed as like Daredevil 7, Daredevil 9, Daredevil 16.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I'm also so fascinated by what Foggy calls Daredevil, that he calls him like glamour boy. And
Oh
I'm
my
just like,
God.
Foggy Nelson, you of the neon pink suits and green
The fucking
checks and
ties.
like
Yeah.
whatever, and your perfect hair, and you're like chilling out. Like, what are you trying to say about this guy?
I
Like, who are you comparing him to? Because he looks
well,
just the same as the other ones.
meanwhile, Foggy looks gorgeous in this
I
panel,
mean, he
first
does
of
look
all.
good. They're getting
That is,
into like making Foggy look different from Matt, and I think it's
thank
going
goodness.
well. It's going well.
And you're right. This has been, you coming from the show a little sooner means you got that opportunity to like fall for Foggy in a way where like when you were like, I love Foggy, I was like, why? And you would be like, because the show, and I'd be like, but there's 500 issues of bad. And you would be like, right, but that's not what I'm talking about. And I'd be like, I can't separate them. And like, I feel as though your take on it's not even like just jealousy, but there's so many 60s like social politics at play here. The inherent, like, I hate to use, but I can't find a better way to put it, the embarrassment he must feel that this blind guy keeps getting over him,
Mm-hmm,
keeps getting better than him.
mm-hmm.
And he's not a slouch.
No, he's not. He's not. And like, we're gonna get into it because Foggy's gonna have a lot of self doubt coming up. But like, he's he is admittedly a catch. He is admittedly a good dude, and there's
Yes.
no reason why he shouldn't be pulling left and right. Because even when they're like blah 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 flabby, eventually we're gonna see him in the suit, and it's not the worst. He's not like
No,
jacked, but he's not the worst.
and he's so not jacked, but not the worst that Spider-Man can entertain that Foggy is Daredevil for a minute.
Yeah.
He's not really sure how, but he can entertain it for a minute. And that's one of those things that I think is really important to remember. when you're thinking about these kinds of stories where how can somebody not tell? Because, like, one of my big things is if Peter Parker is this big, every fucking kid in school is afraid of him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because like I would be
Oh my
wandering through,
God.
I would be wandering through that streets and being like, little nerdy Peter Parker over there, Jesus fucking Christ! Like
Like fucking Monster Boy.
how many sweaters does he have to wear to hide those delts or whatever those are?
Yes, I'm all of it though. Where's his neck? Look at his shoulders. That bicep is the size of Foggy. Period.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
something that's really interesting about the ways in which I wonder if at this exact moment in time, Peter is being drawn this big in Spider-Man, because one of the things that we see here is a total role reversal of the things that made Amazing Spider-Man 16 kind of charming. Although I love that they're in each other's 16. That's so
I
cute,
know that
right?
made me. They're so sweet. It's a sweet 16
So
moment.
it is, and they're best buddies. I love it. So, the thing there was Spider-Man was like, gotta keep punching, can't stop punching, gotta keep punching, gonna punch, punch. But instead, we get here that Spider-Man's like, I'm gonna do the investigating. Like, I'm disappointed that Daredevil in this story is, with the exception of this panel where Spider-Man looks glorious, Daredevil is kind of the reasonable one in most of this story. I mean, I'm sorry, Spider-Man is kind of the reasonable one in most of this story. He's like, we have a thing, we have to get to it. Daredevil never considers that Spider-Man isn't evil, and he's the adult. Like, he's a
Yeah.
lawyer. Why isn't he looking for
I
evidence?
think they both kind of. I'm so fascinated by the idea that they both just jump to, he's gone bad. And I'm like, do we have a history of our heroes going bad at this point in Marvel?
Not
Like,
yet.
so then why is this the first thing they jump to? Like, is it the idea of absolute power corrupts absolutely? And so you have to always keep an eye out?
Well, let me ask you a question from your perspective, because I'm pitching this. I've never
Mm-hmm.
thought of this out really before. But what if we consider it that almost all of these heroes have a someone in my life betrayed me moment early on or in their origin? So Maddie finds out that his dad's agent is a bad guy and is the fixer.
Mm-hmm.
Peter lets this guy go and it ultimately kills Uncle Ben. And how many scientists in Peter's life are ultimately bad guys? Perhaps in their line of work, for fear reasons, they hyper rely on the merit of my radar saves me, whether it's the spider sense or it's Daredevil's radar sense. My instinct, my gut is what keeps me alive. So if someone I've trusted is coming up against me, I have to be instinctive and try and stay alive.
I guess. I guess.
I
I
don't love it
guess.
either.
I don't love it because that makes them a lot more paranoid than they are generally portrayed. And I
What is this,
think
a Mark Waid comic?
and I also think that means that they're not open to team ups, and we know superheroes love a team up. And so if they're constantly feeling like they have to watch their back in case it's betrayal, like you can you won't want to team up as much. And it would also mean that Matt probably wouldn't think Elektra was that hot of an idea. And Spider-Man probably wouldn't think Black Cat was such a hot idea. So
Well, what's really funny is Daredevil ultimately thinks that Black Cat is a pretty hot idea, and Spider-Man never thinks Elektra is a hot idea, ever.
I don't think anyone except for Matt does.
I mean,
Everyone else
Ben
looked at
Urich
that
thinks
and is
she's got
like,
a really good point.
she's got two of them. Six, maybe.
Let's go to the movies, right? Now,
Yeah.
I know we've jumped around the story a bit, but I want to, the best that I can, show a panel from the letters page of one of the issues. Now, in my handy dandy Daredevil omnibus, I'm also using this beautiful backdrop to simulate the incredible Chris Samney art of the Mark Waid run. And the panel I would like to show has a lot of yellow. So this could go horribly wrong. But yeah, it might go horribly wrong. But you can kind of see the
Oh
Daredevil's
yes, no,
shadow,
love the shadow. Every time the shadow comes up, I'm like, he gets hotter every time.
right? It's so good. It looks so great. It is one of those things where, like, I was lucky enough to be having a conversation with one of our incredible contributors over on X's for Podcast, the partner show to this Daredevil podcast, or Daredevil videocast, as it were, which happens to
Ooh.
be a podcast where we talk all about everything Marvel. And I was talking with longtime fan Steve, who can be found over at Howdy Duda on Twitter and Instagram. And Steve has been reading Silver Age books forever, and we were talking about how the letters pages are just so crazy that, like, you can't believe how many people, like, come for Jack Kirby in the letters pages of every book, and then once Jack Kirby's gone, all the letters start being like, oh man, this guy sucks, bring back Jack Kirby. And the only thing that's consistent between them is Stan Lee was responsible for putting them together. Was Stan Lee just negging all of the other people that he worked with these letters pages?
I,
Was this the burn book?
I swear to God, like everyone has added creators on Twitter like they do now. Just it just took longer to get to them.
I can't. Now,
Maybe
Tori, how
Stan
did
Lee
you
was the
feel?
bully along.
I would believe it. But, when you're in charge, it's hard not to be the guy in charge. And
Yeah.
Stan Lee, as the guy pasting together these letters pages, I can't even imagine what it was like to have this fledgling company sitting completely on your shoulders. I am certainly not saying anything Stan Lee did that might have been passive aggressive was okay, nor am I saying Stan Lee is the devil. I am saying that I could imagine a young professional who had some issues with historically sharing credit, as has been evidenced by some deeper looks into the inner workings at Marvel Comics, could have perhaps passive aggressively crafted together a letters page that made other people feel bad.
Or just didn't talk about him.
Yeah, because even when we talk about the letters that do kind of talk about, like, oh man, that Daredevil guy sucks. It's like, that Daredevil guy sucks. It's never like, man, you're writing, Stan Lee. I'm going to put you in a box and kick it. Like, it's
Yeah.
like Daredevil's not Spider-Man. He should stop being such a wimp. I can't. But what I can is, how do you feel about these fight sequences, Tori? I am so fascinated to know on your opinion on this back and forth between Spidey and Daredevil.
I think it is very fun. I think I think our letterist Artie Simek in this one and then Sammy Rosen in the next did some amazing work.
Amazing.
I think for me it's hard to read fight scenes when when I'm just like, just open your mouths and talk to each other.
Yeah.
Just open your, like, both of you are so chatty and you're both thinking thoughts that are on the same line. And all you have to do is convince each other. So when he like tied Spider-Man up, I was like, all right, this is where Matt goes like this and says, listen, bud, and we're going to talk it out. But no, then he just leaves.
And that's the weirdest part, because I really love the way that they draw him in, and I think that the immensity of Spider-Man is a really great way to, in Daredevil, make kid Spider-Man seem like a fucking man, because he is so powerful. Otherwise, if you're reading Daredevil because it's not the kid book, when Spider-Man shows up, this kid's a fucking kid. He's not going to give Daredevil any hard time. But one of the things that also makes Daredevil kind of more the adult book is occasionally it's so word heavy. I cannot forgive this page.
Was there a
This
thing where he was
page,
like 17 letter bubble? There it is, 17 word
yeah,
bubbles, and God help us all. I mean, this is the part where I went, oh, finally, someone like Foggy actually recognizes that like Daredevil is a separate person in the Karen wants going after Karen thing from Matt, where we get like actual like, okay, there's 4 of them in this love triangle now.
And when she's like, who wouldn't want to be Daredevil himself? A lot of people wouldn't want to be Daredevil, and not just because of things she doesn't know, but not everybody wants to be a superhero at this point in the Marvel continuity.
No.
Like,
And to be honest, like,
vigilantes?
yeah, yeah. And also, like, it's hard being king. There are many of us who, from a very young age, were like, no, 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 no leading. Thank you. I'll be back here enjoying my safety.
Yeah. And it takes a very specific kind of person to lead in very specific ways. You can be like, I actually think, and it's not just that Deborah Ann Wall, please, Deborah Ann Wall, if you can ever hear these words, you gave us something I will never, ever forget. You made Karen Page a hero to me. And like, that is so important. And I
And
think
very
even
difficult from the source material.
so hard. And I feel as though not just the recontextualization of the beautiful work done in Daredevil Yellow or the TV show re-enhancing it, but you can really see where actually Karen Page is actually the boss at Nelson and Murdock. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not tricky at all. It's like super surface. It's right there.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, part of that is because, like, back in the day, everybody knew that if you had a girl, she's the one that you go to about money things and, where are the bills paid and like all this stuff. Like, the men are doing work, the ladies here to make sure the place runs. And so I really appreciate how much we see her having to deal with that, if only to show that, like, Nelson and Murdock ain't doing so great, which I find hilarious after someone just went on a giant cruise for 3 weeks.
Well, he had to clear his head because life was getting hard or whatever.
Or whatever.
I I want to comment two things about where this just should have been part two, a Spider-Man issue.
I hear that because we get to a point where we have a whole, like, 3 to 4 pages that's just Spider-Man. Like, we see Aunt May, we walk through him through the stuff. J. Jonah Jameson shows up, who is hilarious. Like, I definitely hear you on that.
And it's not that like I'm unhappy. Peter looks really handsome and that's like sweet. It reminds me that he is a kid a little bit and it like reminds me to cheer for him. Like, you get a sense that Peter's a good guy, but like fucking Mad Dog J. Jonah Jameson looking fucking unhinged and I love it.
And full on
I
Hitler
love it.
stash.
And he's got JJJ TV and it's the 60s.
I
So
know. I
I'm
know.
I'm speechless at how this fucking Alex Jones motherfucker over here was bringing the crazy. Look at that face.
Yeah.
He's crazy,
You
and
can.
he predicted Fox News.
How? No, and like that's 100% why I think that they pulled from this idea that we got that version in No Way Home or Far From Home. Can't Come Home?
Totally. Spider-Man, not a homo, whatever it was called.
Spider-Man, Jake Gyllenhaal toured 2021.
Man, I only wish because I'm so happy that we got that Daredevil moment in Spider-Man, but I would have loved to have seen Jake Gyllenhaal and Tobey Maguire on screen together. That energy could have been so fucking fun. And I know I'm looking to do an Into the Spider-Verse for just the films that are not the amazing upcoming animated movie where like I got so confused because I was saying to somebody that I heard that Issa Rae is going to be Spider-Woman. And I'm like, but that's weird because her name isn't listed in the film. No, she's in Into the Spider-Verse, not the upcoming Spider-Woman film. That's also not the upcoming Madam Web film, I think.
There's a lot going on.
It's crazy. But we have this Spider-Man here, Peter looking like an adorable young man who's ready to help his Aunt May take out the recycling. And I love it.
The word young is used very liberally here.
Yeah, I think where I'm getting that he looks young is he has that Disney animatronic look
Hmm.
where this is the face of young man.
Yeah, the fewer lines, the younger you look.
Yeah, which is why if you stand behind blinds, you look like Clint Eastwood. So, do your best not to do that. Okay, let me ask you a question. I know I made the comment earlier on. Where do you think the line is on replacing or repairing art? I love that the cover is up right now because that color palette for Masked Marauder is fucking sick. I love that color palette for Masked Marauder. The sort of generic kind of
Purpley nonsense.
purpley nonsense. Yeah, I was trying to think of a better way to but the purpley nonsense is really underwhelming. I would rather Masked Marauder always be those colors and look a little bit in that cuz in the book he just sort of looks like any bad guy that Daredevil's going to fight 100 times.
I
But here he looks like
for
a Star Wars character. I love it.
I yeah, I forgot that he wasn't the organizer
Yes.
because it's basically the same, and
Or
especially when he's in
Deathstalker
the
with the hat.
yeah, but especially when he's in that like purpley gray outfit, I'm like, I've seen this silhouette and color scheme before, and so it had me really like taken aback, I guess.
And I'm also a little disappointed, I guess, because I kind of wanted the blimp to make an appearance on the cover. Like
The
the blimp is
Zeppelin.
the star of the issue. Yeah. It's
Thank God we
great and
didn't shoot down our blimp, our own blimp, as opposed to being like, why is our own blimp making an unscheduled appearance?
yeah, it's such a wacky story, and it ultimately just kind of ends, is one of the things about this story that I can't help but notice. Like a lot of these early Daredevil adventures, the bad guy gets away because they want the bad guy to be in more stories. Daredevil just kind of gets his shit together. I feel like the guy who gets the hardest schwack out of the way in this issue is Matt Murdock.
Oh yeah.
There is no Matt Murdock in this issue because even when Daredevil is in the scene as Matt Murdock, I feel like it's Daredevil wearing a Matt Murdock costume, not Matt Murdock outside of the Daredevil costume.
Yeah, we lost a little bit of Matt by bringing in Spider-Man, and I think this is kind of what we've talked about before, where like when you bring a bunch of superheroes together, they become extreme versions of themselves because otherwise it's just the same people saying the same things, and
Exactly.
so Matt kind of can't exist in the same space as Spider-Man whenever they're in the room together because it's about Daredevil.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, Daredevil is Foggy Nelson.
Okay. Obviously, I love Guts Nelson because I bring it up every other day. Um, I love everything Foggy in context, recontextualized, that makes Foggy a stand-up guy, and things
Mm-hmm.
like Guts Nelson do. This
Mm-hmm.
is beyond my scope of believability here. I feel like Spider-Man with Spidey sense should be able to oh, that guy's strong.
Like, here's the thing: Daredevil's radar sense can figure out that there's a teenage boy under there.
Yes,
He can
yes,
figure out
great
there's a
point.
teenage boy. He can hear the differences. He's like, oh, he's big, but he's bigger, but he's stronger than he is because of blah blah blah. Spidey's radar sense is more like that vibration is somewhere over there. And he follows over there and he sees a blind guy and a girl and he dismisses the girl and the blind guy. And he's like, well, I guess it's this guy then. And but then the thing is that this is some of the most impulsive that he is all issue, where he just like
Yes, yes.
slams in and like is ready to tear the head off of this. A blind man, a girl, but the third. So
That
like that's
has to
the
be
thing.
him.
It's like that's the thing that Daredevil's is far closer to like echolocation when it comes to his senses, whereas Spidey's is more, I don't really know if it has, it's, I guess it's like following the chemtrails, kind of. And then you're like,
Okay.
aha, or like, or maybe it's more like, not a Geiger counter, a spectrometer, where you're like, a ghost is here somewhere.
I really follow what you're saying. And I think that's one of the reasons that Daredevil just kind of getting to get away is fine. If Spider-Man had ultimately stayed like, no, no, I'm sure it's this guy. Gotta fight him. Spider-Man and Daredevil's fight is so great because Spider-Man doesn't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Daredevil knows that he's got to get the shit kicked out of him. Like, that's the magic. Chip Zdarsky, who's currently writing Batman and Daredevil, when he was asked who would win, he said, "Oh, absolutely Batman, because Batman never loses and Daredevil always loses. So, who would win? Batman. But who would win is really not the same thing as who would win in a punch punch.
Mm-hmm.
Batman would win in a punch punch, but like Daredevil tied Spider-Man up just long enough to get away. He didn't tie Spider-Man up thinking he had him defeated. So when Spider-Man doesn't make his life's goal tracking Daredevil and tracks him, I guess thinking of it as Spider-Man's senses are limited, especially later on, Matt would sit in one place till he heard Spider-Man and then charge after him. You know what I mean? That's a really great point as to how they're different.
Or maybe he's, yeah, because then I guess when I hear it like that, he's more like a bloodhound who is like, I got a smell of you over there, and now I'm getting a smell of you over here, but it's just not as pinpoint as it could be.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Now, I have to say, my favorite page of the issue is probably that final 2 pages or so. So I guess it's 2 pages. I really like a lot of the blues. I really like a lot of the richness of the color. I'm highly amused by the guy in his boxers.
I
And
love
then,
that
of
Foggy's in a
course,
red coat as if he went out and bought it to prove that he's secretly Daredevil.
oh, I know. And it's so much more mysterious than Foggy used to dress. Like, Foggy's usually just in the little pea coat, but like, this is
Yep.
like a full length coat. This thing is
Yeah.
fucking fabulous.
He is leaning into this because he's like, oh, right, the girl I'm in love with will chase anything in spandex, from Aquaman to Spider-Man to the Purple Man. She's just fascinated by them.
I also love that they mention the XB390 on this page, which I know Masked Marauder had a plan all along. He
Mm-hmm.
was stealing something, and it was have daredevils to help create distractions and help
Mm-hmm.
steal it. And, you know, we really did it in a roundabout way, but we got there. And then the way they distracted Daredevil, the way they distracted the Masked Marauder was Daredevil went to J. Jonah Jameson and said, "Hey, say that they're missing this component." I am kind of amused that Masked Marauder wasn't like, "Let me see if I'm really missing the component or not."
No, he was just like, oh, that fool. He gave it all away. And so I'm the smart one now. And you're just like, oh, Jesus Christ. They fall for it every goddamn time. Every
But the
time.
fact that they mention it on the last page kind of it's weird because I'm not used to reading Daredevil issues where there's a panel where hours later Daredevil is thinking back on the adventure. We usually, if it ends with the bad guy in the water, we end on the pier.
Yep.
If it ends with the bad guy in jail, we end outside the courthouse because they're immediately arraigning them somehow.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think what it is that usually those issues, mystery solved. Got the bad guy. We know what he wanted, blah, blah, blah. But the thing with this one is now there's a new mystery. The fuck is up with Foggy?
Yeah,
The
and
fuck
they
is up with
didn't get
Foggy?
Mask Marauder.
No. And so I feel like I'm really excited for like the continuity that we're about to see more of, where it's not as
Yeah.
as much continuity as like the Kazar one or like other ones where it's a twofer, where this is more like the B plot will come back. And so to me, that's a more interesting continuity than just like the bad guy's still around.
Now, of course, I have yet to mention my favorite thing about this page. I love so few characters in Daredevil the way I love the Gladiator. And his
Melvin.
costume has Melvin. Oh, and he's so hot. I mean, like, not that we're there yet, but like by 1960s standards, the fucking ridiculous package they put on him on the next cover is insane. Um, and he's so built and he's so hot. I love Melvin, and I love the portrayal from the TV show, however little of it we got.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so interesting that Gladiator comes next because this issue, we had a bunch of people dressed as Daredevil. Gladiator comes along with his own costume shop kind of thing. It feels very much like, hey, check it out, it's Gladiator. It feels very much to me like we were seeing threads of who Daredevil is, this question of identity and who is who, and how does identity play out against itself? In what ways are we presenting who we want to be? And I feel like Stan Lee was getting ever closer to that idea being such a central tenet of what
Mm-hmm.
makes a Daredevil story.
I
But
agree.
it's we're getting closer.
For sure, for sure. I think that we are getting closer and closer to pulling Matt and Daredevil apart and giving them each their own reasons for being. And
I love that.
I think that once 18 and 19, which are a pair as well, I'm hoping that we get a little more lawyering because that's usually what happens after we have a lot of fight issues. We get like a good court case. And I'm looking forward to when we can have a court case and fight back in the same issue again.
And I think one of the reasons that I am so eager to see the book continue on is, first of all, I did just make it very clear I find Melvin very, very attractive. But so, like, I think about his costume sometimes, and I can't help but notice that once again, we have a weird coloring situation where on the cover, he's clearly in heavy, heavy tones of green. But, like, in the book, he is a much more blue based character. And the pants are green here. They're actually blue in the book. He's got a blue belt here. It's actually a green belt in the book. The helmet is actually blue. The armband accessories are only there sometimes. You can't see any of his beautiful chest hair. So there's little things that get changed around a bit. Yeah, like you can see here, it's a totally different look in terms of the coloration. It's all blue instead of green. So I look forward to getting to the points in Comic Con. Yeah, like the boots are white inside, and here the boots are a different color. I look forward to getting to where there's a little bit more care put into the book overall. How does it read back? How does it interplay with other issues? Is there continuity in the costume? Is there continuity of story? There's details and elements that this book deserves, and I can't wait for them.
Yeah, yeah. I think that they're getting into the rhythm of having it come out every month, and soon they're going to start treating it like it comes out every month.
Oh, that's it. I have nothing. I'm gonna mention that the letters page is currently called "Let's Level with Daredevil,"
All right, well, level it at me.
and more than anything, I just want to draw our attention to anytime we think Daredevil gets drawn poorly, he could always be the Thing in this panel. Man,
It's
this thing hates yellow.
ground meat, my friend. They always look like hardened ground meat.
I love Daredevil reaching out like he loves you.
He does.
Right?
He does.
I can't figure out what finger to move.
You
Here.
got it. That one. You got it.
Man, this has been such an exciting trip. I love Spider-Man and Daredevil together. I'm so excited for Gladiator. I love that even though this could kind of be treated as a four-part thing, we treated it as two-parters. That feels a little bit truer to what it is. Tori, I love this book more and more when I talk to you about it, in part because, like, you point out things I never realized, like the ways in which how many of these images that are so iconic to these stories might not even be Matt Murdock as Daredevil, but rather one of the imposters. it's just such an exciting thing to find reasons to love this, to find reasons to cover this in the past instead of jumping to the future. And after a bunch of episodes where we were like, this one's fine, I'm giving this two-parter a B plus.
Yeah.
I love it. Maybe an A minus. It's so fun. It's so good, and it was a blast to talk about.
Aw, I really like it. I like for what it opens up. When you don't put a bow on it as much as we normally do, I really feel like it opens it up so that these things can have a more lasting impression upon the characters and allow them to grow.
Completely.
Hmm.
Well, speaking of allow people to grow, we want to give our amazing audience a chance to ruminate on these incredible stories. So until we come back, Tori, I know that we kind of skipped it earlier on, but where can everybody find you online?
You can find me at Tori_Sheehan on Twitter and at SM Tori, as you can see with an eye. Where can people find you, Nico?
You guys can find me everywhere at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION. You guys can also find me over on the partner show to this program, which is X is for Podcast. You can find that over at xisforpodcast.com and at X is for Podcast on Twitter. You guys can also find my original work at both kidriotcomics.com, where I work with the amazing Tori and our brilliant producer Kevo on our creator-owned work, as well as in the recently released Young Men in Love, where I was lucky enough to work with Jude Vegans, and we contributed a story about, I guess, kind of like Daredevil-like characters. I don't know, but it's a lot of fun. I'm so proud to be part of this book with industry greats like Joe Glass, Anthony Oliveira, Sina Grace, Terry Bloss. Unbelievable caliber of people to stand alongside. Couldn't be prouder. I feel like Spider-Man standing with Daredevil on this one. So,
Aww.
right? But
Right. Until then, you
until
can
we
check us
return,
out. You can check us out on at the Billy Club Pod, but make sure to stay fearless.
stay fearless.
Closer. We're getting closer.
We're only a little afraid.
We're just like, maybe. Okay.